And Moshe said, Hear, O Yisrael, Yahweh your Elohim, Yahweh is one, and you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your might. And these words which I am commanding you today shall be in your heart, and you shall impress them upon your children, and shall speak of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way, when you lie down and when you rise up, and shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom to everyone worshiping with us at home. It's mighty good to be here today, and we're continuing in our series about Campaign 2008 and beyond. And the name of the message today is called Slingin, Lies, and Deceit. Okay? Now, last week I gave a message called Know Your Opponent. We discussed several things regarding the campaign for Yahweh in 2008 and beyond. We established that Yahweh is our candidate, and Yahweh has all the things necessary for a campaign. We saw in Deuteronomy 30 that Yahweh does indeed have a platform, and in that chapter He lays out His agenda, which is choose Yahweh, to love Yahweh and obey His voice, and He will bless us with great blessings. And if you do not choose Yahweh, to love Yahweh and obey His voice, then you will get what comes from not choosing Him, which is what? The curses. All right? And Yahweh has policies and programs and promises, which we are all quite familiar with. All right? And we also acknowledge that Yahweh has another key ingredient for a campaign. Do you remember what it is? An opponent. An opponent. All right? And Yahweh's opponent is a bad guy. Amen? He's got lots of little helpers too. But he will use all sorts of dirty tricks and tactics to get you to reject Yahweh's campaign. He was able to convince a third of the messengers of heaven to reject Yahweh and even fight against Him. Okay? So he's pretty good at this. And Yahweh's opponent is no less interested in getting you to reject Yahweh as well. And today I want to delve a little further into knowing your opponent and look at some of his tactics. I'll also bring to your attention just how we're doing in this campaign for Yahweh. And the reason this message is called Slingin, Lies, and Deceit is because this is something that often happens in campaigns. Seen a little bit of it lately. Yeah. And because that is exactly the way that our opponent and those working for him conduct his campaign. Right? Through mudslinging, outright lies, and subtle deceit. Anybody relate? Yeah. Anybody that's a campaigner for Yahweh ever had any mud slung at them? Any of you ever been before told outright lies? Oh yeah, not that you told them, but have been told outright lies. I'm not going to ask you if you've told outright lies because you might tell another one. And subtle deceit. Amen? All right. And we have to be on the lookout for his tactics. Now, this is interesting to me. The Pew Research Center recently did a survey or a study on religious attendance in America and how America is losing its religion. Now, on one hand, some of you might say, well, that's a good thing, but no, see, not. What they found should not be a surprise to any of those who have been keeping their eye on our opponent, Shatan. Right? Perhaps you may not have thought it was this bad, but from this article at the Washington Examiner, there was a story about the Pew survey. And I think it's a little ironic that the Pew Research Center did a survey on how many have left the pews. It's just kind of, can't make it up. All right, anyway, the name of the article, I'm going to clean it up. Pew, Americans Giving Up on Elohim, Miracles. All right. Half of Americans who have left the church no longer believe in Elohim, who have left their church no longer believe in Elohim. leading a surge of nearly 1/4 of the nation who have no affiliation with any religion, according to a new survey. All right. That means for every 4 people you see walking down the street, one of them has no affiliation at all. That doesn't mean the other 3 are very devout. Follow me? All right. Pew Research Center said Wednesday that 49% of what they term as nuns, not N-U-N-S, but N-O-N-E-S, all right, nuns, left their church and religion because they don't believe. Another 20% said they don't like organized religion. Other reasons include, quote, common sense and a lack of belief in miracles. The survey is the latest from Pew that demonstrates a growing trend in America. More and more people are junking religion, and many are giving up on Elohim. Pew interviewed several respondents to try and find a reason. Pew said, for example, about half of current religious N-O-N-E-S nuns who were raised in a religion, 49% indicate that a lack of belief led them to move away from religion. This includes many respondents who mention, quote, science as the reason they do not believe in religious teachings, including one who said, I'm a scientist now. I don't believe in miracles. Others reference common sense, quote, logic, or a lack of evidence, or simply say they do not believe in Elohim. I would say that the folks that say there's no evidence are just not looking at the facts. Right. Now, here are some of the examples that were listed in this article. It's broken down into 4 categories. Probably won't read all of them, but you might be able to relate to some of these. Under the heading of don't believe. Learning about evolution when I went away to college. That's why I don't believe. Next, too many Christians doing unchristian things. Listen, if you're walking away from Elohim because people aren't acting the way you think they ought to act, then you're studying the wrong crowd. I mean, next, religion is the opiate of the people. Who said that? Karl Marx. All right, but that's what they say. Rational thought makes religion go out the window. Is any of this offending any of you? Lack of any sort of scientific or specific evidence of a creator. Next, I just realized somewhere along the line that I didn't really believe it. And the last one of those is I'm doing a lot more learning and studying and kind of making decisions myself rather than listening to someone else. Well, we've done that, haven't we? And look where we are. You know. Then under the heading is they dislike religion. They dislike organized religion. I see organized religious groups as more divisive than uniting. Yahshua said, I came to bring a sword. I think that more harm has been done in the name of religion than any other area. Now see, what a lot of this is they're just parroting. I can tell you they're parroting stuff. I no longer believe in organized religion. I don't attend services anymore. I just believe that religion is very personal. It's very personal conversation with me and my Creator. Next, because I think religion is not a religion anymore. It's a business. It's all about money. Here's one. but that's a reason to go in there and turn over the tables, isn't it? To turn over the tables and run them out. Not to walk away from it. The clergy sex abuse scandal and the church's teaching on homosexuality is one reason why they're not going to be involved in it. All right? And let's see. Then you got the undecided. I don't have a particular religion because I'm open-minded, and I don't think there's one particular religion that's right or wrong. And so on and on it goes, and we see all of these different reasons for why people have walked away from Elohim in whatever form it may have been taken. And it goes on and on. Now, is Yahweh's opponent making any headway with these folks, you think? A quarter of the country has no affiliation with religion at all. Now, There's some people that have come into this walk because they didn't have an affiliation with, but most of us came in here because we were affiliated with something else, and we realized that this was where it was supposed to go. All right? You better believe that Yahweh is making some headway with these people. And I'm sorry, that Shatan is making headway with these people. Thank you. And many of these are the mudslingers that you have to deal with. Oh, you're just not smart. You're not open-minded. Oh, you don't look at the signs, etc. But this is not something new. Look with me in 1 Corinthians chapter 1. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, we're going to start reading in verse 18. It's going to be on page 1102. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 18. For the word of the stake is indeed what? Foolishness to those who are perishing. But to those who are being saved, it is the power of Elohim. For it has been written, I shall destroy the wisdom of the wise and set aside the learning of the learned ones. You know where a lot of this stuff is bred? In college. It's where a lot of people said they stopped going in college. Where is the wise? Where is the scholar? Where is the debater of this age? Has not Elohim made foolish the wisdom of this world? For since, in the wisdom of Elohim, the world through wisdom did not know Elohim. It pleased Elohim through the foolishness of preaching to save those who believe. And since Yehudim ask a sign, and Greeks seek wisdom, yet we proclaim Messiah impelled to the Yehudim a stumbling block, and to the Greeks foolishness. But to those who are called, both Yehudim and Greeks, Messiah, the power of Elohim, and the wisdom of Elohim. For the foolishness of Elohim is wiser than men, and the weakness of Elohim is stronger than men. For look at your calling, brothers, that you are not many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble. But Elohim has chosen the foolish matters of the world to put to shame the wise, and Elohim has chosen the weak of the world to put to shame the strong. And Elohim has chosen the lowborn of the world and the despised and the ones that are not, and the ones that are not, that he might bring to naught the ones that are, so that no flesh should boast in his presence. And of him you are in Messiah Yahshua, who became for us wisdom from Elohim, righteousness also, and set apartness and redemption, that, as it has been written, he who boasts, let him boast in Yahweh. So we see that this attitude's been running around for a long time. I mean, it's nothing new. I think that most of these people were looking for an excuse not to serve Yahweh's campaign anyway. You know it? That's what I think. And stuff like this just gives them a way out in their own minds. Just because you got a way out in your own mind doesn't mean you've really got a way out. I mean, all right. My son has a bachelor's degree in biology. Okay? Now, for those of you who may not know, biology is the science of life or living matter in all its forms and phenomena, especially with reference to origin, growth, reproduction, structure, and behavior. Now, my son Joey, he has a heart for Yahweh. He has a heart for Yahweh, and you know what he does? He campaigns for Yahweh. He campaigns for Yahweh regularly. Joey told me that the more, now remember, he's sitting in college now. He said the more he learned about biology, the more it proved Yahweh to him. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Somebody that's got a heart for Yahweh, when they looked at this stuff, they saw Yahweh. All right? He even had to take evolution as part of his degree study, and even that didn't turn him away, like some of the people mentioned in the Pew study. So what's the difference? One person has the wisdom of the world, and the other has the wisdom of Elohim. All right? One wants out, one wants in. Now, If Satan can't get you to leave Yahweh through lust of the flesh and disinformation that will cause you to abandon Yahweh altogether, he will feed you disinformation to get you to abandon Yahweh while sitting in the congregations. Now, this is a more crafty approach because it takes people who want to serve and tricks them into going in a way that's not tov. It's not good. Right? And this is why we have a campaign for Yahweh. You see, there are people from the Christian church to Messianic Judaism to the Hebrew Roots movement to even Yahweh congregations that Shatan has been hard at work trying to get them to abandon Yahweh's program. I get an amen? All right? While thinking that they're still walking in righteousness. All right? Now, Shatan, anybody know what he's using? The oldest trick in the book. Now, if you're not familiar with the oldest trick in the book, please watch it on our YouTube channel. You folks at home. And you here if you hadn't seen it. Go to YouTube and look at the oldest trick in the book. You might just be surprised to find out that you've been falling for it and didn't even know it. Because it's a good one. It's a good one. But ever since Genesis chapter 3, the opponent has been convincing people that if they break Yahweh's commands for the right reasons, then somehow Yahweh will be pleased with their disobedience. Now, if that doesn't make sense to you, go watch the oldest trick in the book, and it will. It didn't work in the garden as far as pleasing Yahweh. It didn't work in the garden, and it won't work today. And none of us like to consider the possibility, but again, please go watch the oldest trick in the book and see if perhaps you've been duped by the devil. We don't like to think about that. So how does he do it? What are some of the ways that Yahweh's opponent, Shatan, how does he do it? Look at 2 Corinthians chapter 11. We looked at this last week, but it's important to remember. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, we're going to start reading in verse 13. We'll be on page 1124. Second Corinthians chapter 11, verse 13. For such are false emissaries. What are those next two words? Deceit. Deceptive workers, masquerading as emissaries of Messiah. And no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as a messenger of light. It is not surprising then that if his servants also masquerade as servants of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works. Well, this couldn't possibly be referring to the guy I like to listen to. He's really smart. He knows what he's talking about. You ever felt that way about somebody, or do you know people who feel that way about somebody that you can see right through it? Really? This couldn't possibly be referring to the guy that you like to listen to. Why do you think Paul then warned you about these folks? Do you think that Satan is really smart? Satan is really smart. Do you think that Satan can quote scriptures to lead you astray? He sure quoted scripture to Yeshua, didn't he? He will use people, those that are masquerading as emissaries of Messiah, to do the same thing. There are Yahweh people who, if it weren't for the fact that they were saying Yahweh and Yeshua, you might think that you were back in the Christian church. All right? Let me give you some examples. All right? I want to look at something in Matthew 5 versus John 19:30 versus Revelation 21. We'll look at this. Look with me at Matthew chapter 5 verse 1. Matthew chapter 5 and verse 1. But when he saw the crowds, he went up on a mountain, and when he was seated, his taught ones came to him, and having opened his mouth, he was teaching them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, because theirs is the reign of the heavens. Verse 4. Blessed are those who mourn, because they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, because they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for what they don't have to do in the Torah, but can still get into the kingdom of heaven anyway. Is that what yours says? It didn't say that. That's what it says. It probably does say in some footnotes somewhere. It says, Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, because they shall be filled. Okay, and that's very, very important right there. That's a very important thing. To hunger and thirst for righteousness versus see what you can get out of and still get in. Amen? All right. Blessed are the compassionate. Blessed because they shall obtain compassion. Blessed are the clean in heart, because they shall see Elohim. Blessed are the peacemakers, because they shall be called the sons of Elohim. Blessed are those persecuted for righteousness' sake, because theirs is the reign of the heavens. Blessed are you when they reproach you, sling mud at you, persecute you, and falsely say, there's lies, every wicked word against you for my sake. Rejoice and be glad, because your reward in the heavens is great, for in this way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt becomes tasteless, how shall it be seasoned? For it is no longer of any use but to be thrown out, to be trodden down by men. You are the light of the world. It is impossible for a city to be hidden on a mountain, nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it shines for all those in the house. Let your light so shine before men, so that they see your good works and praise your Father who is in the heavens. Is Yahshua talking about campaigning for Yahweh here? He sure is. He's also laying out what righteousness looks like. Right? But he doesn't stop there. He doesn't stop there. 17. Do not think that I came to destroy the Torah or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to complete. For truly I say to you, till the heaven and the earth pass away, one jot or one tittle shall by no means pass from the Torah. What are those next four words? Till all be done. Heaven and earth will pass away. One jot or one tittle shall by no means pass from the Torah till all be done. Whoever then breaks one of the least of these commands and teaches men so shall be called least in the reign of the heavens, but whoever does and teaches them, he shall be called great in the reign of the heavens. For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you shall by no means enter into the reign of the heavens. Now, turn with me to John chapter 19. John chapter 19, we're going to start reading in verse 8. And we're going to do a little word study that I think you're going to find to be relevant and useful. John 19, verse 28. After this, see, Yahshua's been impaled here. This is he's up there, and he is in the process of dying. After this, Yahshua, knowing that all had been accomplished in order that the Scripture might be accomplished, said, I thirst. A bowl of sour wine stood there, and they filled the sponge with sour wine and put it on hyssop and held it to his mouth. So when Yahshua took the sour wine, he said, it has been accomplished, and bowing his head, he gave up his spirit. Now what it says in the KJV it says, and Yahshua said, therefore had received the vinegar, he said, it is finished. And he bowed his head and gave up the ghost. Now the reason I want to look at John 19:30 in particular is the following, and how some people try to use it to get out of serving Yahweh. In the KJV, in the KJV and others, they use the word finished instead of accomplished. All right? And because there are many who teach that when Yahshua said it is accomplished or it is finished, that this means that the old covenant was over and the new covenant had begun. You ever heard that, Robert? And the Torah under which Yahshua lived is no longer binding for believers now. Any of you ever heard that? Yeah. But see, the word translated finished or accomplished is not the same word used in Matthew 5 when he said, till all be done. All right? When Yahshua died and said, it is finished or accomplished, the word used there is Strong's number 5055. Teleo. Okay? It comes from telos, where we get the word telescope. When Yahshua told us that heaven and earth would pass away, but one jot or one tittle would by no means pass from the Torah till all be done, the word translated done or fulfilled in some translations is not teleo. It is the Strong's word genomai. They're not the same word. You might say, big deal. So what? They're not the same word. There's lots of times where different words get used in the Scripture for the same thing, and you would be correct. And these two words do share some similarities in meaning, but not overwhelmingly. Teleo means more in the effect of bring to an end. Okay? The end point. Or bring to the end. Whereas genomai means more to bring into existence overwhelmingly. All right? That's a little different. Bring to an end, bring into existence. All right? Please turn with me to nearly the very end of the Scriptures, to Revelation 21. Where's he going with this? You'll see. Just turn to Revelation 21. We're going to start reading in verse 1. Revelation 21, verse 1. Your translation may say new instead of renewed, but it's okay. And I saw a renewed heaven and a renewed earth, for the former heaven and the former earth had passed away. Does that sound a little familiar with something we read a little while ago? Okay. And the sea is no more. And I, Yochanan, saw the set-apart city, renewed Jerusalem coming down out of the heaven from Elohim, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the heaven saying, see, the booth of Elohim is with men, and he shall dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and Elohim himself shall be with them, and be their Elohim, and Elohim shall wipe away every tear from their eyes. And there shall be no more death, nor mourning, nor crying, and there shall be no pain, for the former matters have passed away. And he who was sitting on the throne said, see, I make all matters new. And he said to me, write these words, write, for these words are true and trustworthy. And he said, it is done. What do you think the word done here is translated from? Teleo? Nope. It is genomai. All right? The same word used when Yahshua is talking about the heaven and the earth passing away, but one jot or one tittle would by no means fall from the Torah till all be done. Genomai. brought into existence till all be fulfilled. What an incredible coincidence. Right? And he said to me, it is done. Genomai. I am the Aleph and I am the Aleph and the Tau. That's who's speaking. The beginning and the end. To the one who thirsts, I shall give of the fountain of water of life without payment. The one who overcomes shall inherit all this, and I shall be his Elohim, and he shall be my son. And do you know what? We know in part that when he said it is finished, that's not referring to the whole of his mission. All right? Because even the only sign that he said that would be given hadn't been accomplished yet. As Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights, so shall the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth. He's still hanging there. He's still hanging there when he said that. Neither had he been resurrected, ascended to the right hand of the Father, put his enemies under his feet, judged the earth, no resurrection of the people yet, etc., etc., and there's no heaven and no new earth. And the passing away of the former matters, for all have been made new. All right? No, it is finished, teleo, brought to an end. What he was referring to, the thing of which he said in the Garden of Gethsemane when he was talking to his Father, "Oh, my Father, if it were possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I desire, but as you desire." All right? The ordeal of being tortured to death. That is what was finished. Now, let me ask you this, a little series of questions. Who is speaking in Matthew 5:17 through 20? Who? Yeshua. And who's speaking during the whole Sermon on the Mount? Yeshua. Okay. Answer this for me. Who wrote the book of Hebrews? No, you do? All right. Who wrote the books of the Torah? Moshe? Who wrote the book of Hebrews? Who wrote the letters to the Corinthians, the Ephesians, Galatians, and Romans? Paul? Y'all, all right, so we got all these names coming back. Who wrote the book of Hebrews? No answer? There's no answer? All right, how about this? Who wrote Revelation? John? Okay. Who wrote the book of Hebrews? Okay. Nobody knows, do they? There's not even an argument in here going back and forth, you know. We know all these other people. We know all these other people. He's 7. We know all these other people, but we ask the question, who wrote the book of Hebrews? You hear crickets. All right? Now, if someone is asked, and I'm talking about how Yahweh uses false emissaries, okay? If someone is asked about Matthew 5:17 through 20, and their response is something like this, and they quote Hebrews 7, verse 8, "For there is verily a disannulling of the commandment going on before the weakness and unprofitableness thereof." And then they say something like, "The writer of the book of Hebrews understands that it is permissible to disannul the former book of the law commandments without abrogating Torah, for both the book of the law and the book of the covenant are both Torah legal entities." You need to watch out. Okay? You need to watch out, all right? Because we just all established, we know who wrote. Okay. An unknown person's understanding is what they said. Oh, I copied and pasted this from somebody's website, so it's not like I just came up with this idea. All right? All right. An unknown person's understanding And I'm not talking about the unknown person that I copied this from their website. He's known by a lot of folks. I'm talking about the author of the book of Hebrews. If an unknown person's understanding supersedes the words of YHWH and that which you can clearly see, what did YHWH say about he who breaks and teaches to break even the least of the commandments? Least in the kingdom of heaven. Okay. All right. That's a red herring when somebody throws something like that out. And then if they start telling you, you need to rightly divide the Torah, so as to get to a place where they are not keeping the Torah as YHWH did, because Hebrews says this or that about changes and this thing and that. Who wrote Hebrews? That's what I thought. You better watch out, people. I getting all mine? All right? If they're teaching to break and breaking the least of the commands, least in the kingdom of heaven, don't listen to them. 1 John chapter 2. Verse 3. Page 1186. 1185. 1 John 2:3. And by this we know that we know Him if we guard His commands. Now, didn't He give a command that says, do not think that I came to destroy, didn't He say that? Heaven and earth will pass away and one jot or one, okay. And by this we know that we know Him if we guard His commands. The one who says, I know Him and does not guard His commands is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoever guards His word, truly the love of Elohim has been perfected in him. By this we know that we are in Him. The one who says he stays in Him ought himself also to walk, even as He walked. Now, did YHWH wear tassels because of a command that was given by Elohim? Absolutely. All right? Did YHWH need a reminder to keep all that Yahweh had commanded, as it says in Numbers 15? But he knew that you did. And he also knew that his Heavenly Father said to do it throughout your generations. How can you walk as YHWH did unless you guard the commands that He guarded? It's all spiritual now. That's right, you spiritually can't. And the answer is you physically can't. All right? Now, all kind of reasons come up. If a person says to you, you're not under that Levitical law or for this thing or that, because the book of Hebrews, now people think we throw Hebrews out. I'll get to that in a minute. But because the book of Hebrews says certain things about the priesthood, who wrote Hebrews again? All right. You better watch out. The Scripture never even refers to something called the Levitical Torah. And besides, yes, Jeremiah 33. Jeremiah 33. We're going to be on page, we're going to start reading at verse 17. We're going to be on page 502. Jeremiah 33, verse 17. For thus said Yahweh, for David, there's not to cease a man to sit on the throne of the house of Yisrael. And for the priests, the Levites, there is not to cease a man to offer burnt offerings before me, to kindle grain offerings, and to slaughter continually. And the word of Yahweh came to Jeremiah, saying, Thus said Yahweh, if you could break my covenant with the day and my covenant with the night, so that there be not day and night in their season, then my covenant could also be broken with David my servant, so that he shall not have a son to reign upon his throne, and with the Levites. the priests my attendants. As the hosts of heaven is not counted, nor the sand of the sea measured, so I increase the descendants of David my servant and the Levites who attend upon me. Has anybody been able to break Yahweh's covenant with the day and the night? You may not know where the Levites are, and I believe that Yahweh does have descendants of David sitting on the throne. You may not know where they are, but I believe they are. That's what this says. If you can't break that covenant, then they're there. You may be a Levite sitting in here and not know it. They're there. However, I do want to say, I'm not opposed to the book of Hebrews. I'm going to quote it. But when you build a whole doctrine around doing away with things which Yahweh said is throughout your generations and forever and everlasting, and they're going to be there continually, etc., there's something wrong with your understanding of Hebrews. All right, now, another guy. If somebody tells you need to do Bible things in Bible ways, and then he turns right around and proceeds to train you in a bunch of unscriptural traditions and understandings, you need to watch out. You need to watch out. If some guy walks around in a costume trying to look like he's a priest or some other character for the Scriptures all the time while he's selling his merchandise on Shabbat, you need to watch out. You need to watch out. Yahshua went through there with a whip of cords. Or if you listen to somebody, because they wear prayer shawl. You know. If they're teaching you to go in a way that's different than Yahshua, you need to watch out. They are campaigning for the opponent. They are masquerading as emissaries of light. And they are full of lies and deceit. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. We're going to start reading in verse 3. We're going to be on page 1150. That upsets some people when you tell them that person that they like is teaching you to go in a way that's not, you know. If you've got to start making up all kind of excuses, why not just... It's like these guys that want to be called rabbi. You know, Yahshua said not to be called rabbi, for you've only got one teacher. And they come up with all these long studies about why it doesn't mean that now, and blah, 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 and why it's okay to call me rabbi. Why don't you just do what Yahshua said and don't do it? You know? Well, I think it's man that makes this stuff hard. Why don't you just do what Yahshua said and don't do it? 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3. Let no one deceive you in any way, because the falling away is to come first, and the man of lawlessness is to be revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called Elohim, or that is worshipped, so that he sits as Elohim, and the dwelling place of Elohim, showing himself that he is Elohim. Do you not remember that I told you this while I was still with you? And now you know what restrains for him to be revealed in his time. For the secret of lawlessness is already at work, back in Paul's day, only until he who now restrains comes out of the midst. And then the lawless one shall be revealed, whom the master shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and bring to naught the manifestation of his coming. The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of who? Yahweh's opponent. Right? Satan. With all power and signs and wonders of falsehood, and with all deceit of unrighteousness, and those perishing because they did not receive the love of the truth in order for them to be saved. And for this reason, Elohim sends them a working of delusion for them to believe the falsehood, in order that all should be judged who did not believe the truth, but have delighted in the unrighteousness. But we ought to give thanks to Elohim always for you, brothers, beloved by the Master, because Elohim from the beginning chose you to be saved in set apartness of spirit and in belief of truth, unto which He called you by our good news for obtaining of the esteem of our Master, YHWH, Messiah. Okay? So there are people out there that are deceiving, working after the workings of Satan. And we know this. But boy, some of them do a good job. Some of them do a good job. Now, let's read something from Hebrews. Because from the time you were at church until today, there are deceivers who use, go ahead and turn to Hebrews chapter 8. There are deceivers using the book of Hebrews to say the old covenant is done away with. Hebrews chapter 8. I'm going to start reading in verse 8, page 1167. Hebrews 8, verse 8. For finding fault with them, he says, see, the days are coming, says Yahweh, when I shall conclude with the house of Yisrael and with the house of Yehudah a renewed covenant. Now, the writer of Hebrews is quoting Jeremiah chapter 31 here. All right. Verse 9. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Mitzrayim, because they did not continue in my covenant. And I disregarded them, says Yahweh. Because this is the covenant that I shall make with the house of Israel after those days, says Yahweh, giving my laws in their mind, and I shall write them on their hearts, and I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people, and they shall by no means teach one his neighbor and each one his brother, saying, Know Yahweh, because they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, because I shall forgive their unrighteousness and their sins and their lawlessness and I shall no longer remember. Now, before I read the next verse, I want to ask you this question. After we've reviewed this, where it says a quarter of the people in the United States of America no longer have any religious affiliation at all, can you say that all know Yahweh from the least to the greatest? No? Is that not part of what this says the new covenant's about? Just asking. Not trying to be difficult here, just looking at what it says. When you have got ministers out there that are teaching people that for this reason and that reason and the other reason you no longer have to keep this command or that command that Yahweh said was everlasting, do they have the law written on their heart? Is that not part of what being in this new covenant means? Is it? And the last verse here, verse 13 says, by saying renewed, he has made the first old. Now what becomes old and growing age is near disappearing. So if we want to talk about something that the writer of Hebrews understood, he understood that it had not disappeared yet. Because near disappearing means it's still hanging around. It is still hanging around. Now, when I was in church, they taught us this meant we're under the new covenant now. But when I look at what it says has got to happen for the new covenant to be in place, it isn't happening. Do you know when that new covenant takes place? What we read in Revelation 21 just a little while ago, when it is done. Because you know what? When we get there, it's going to be written on your heart. And everybody will know Yahweh, and there's not going to be 25% that don't have a religious affiliation, because they're going to be outside. You know what's outside? The lake of fire. All right? And the dogs. going to be in the lake of fire. All right? Second Corinthians chapter 10. 2 Corinthians chapter 10. Okay, but when we look at this, it is sophistry to tell people you're under the new... Oh, I understand Yahshua, what he said at the Passover meal when he had the bread and the fruit of the vine. I understand that. But that's not all the story. And we read this in Jeremiah 31 before Yahshua ever had that meal. All right. 2 Corinthians 10, verse 3. For though we walk in the flesh, we do not fight according to the flesh. For the weapons we fight with are not fleshly, but mighty in Elohim for overthrowing strongholds, overthrowing reasonings. Is that good reasonings or wicked reasonings? 2 Corinthians 10, verse 5, overthrowing reasonings and every high matter that exalts itself against the knowledge of Elohim, taking captive every thought to make it obedient to Messiah, and being ready to punish all disobedience when your obedience is complete. Last week, I had several people that either texted me or came to me personally and said that they really appreciated the message last week. They said it spoke to them. The message about know your opponent. That caught my attention. I don't get up here and teach so that y'all will tell me that you enjoyed the message. But when 4 of you come up and say, I needed to hear that, or that helped with something, that speaks to me. And I woke up one morning and I realized just how much campaigning this small congregation really does. And I was quite impressed with what you folks do. I was quite impressed with what you folks do. Now, I don't mean to leave anybody out. But I want to mention some of the things that go on in this small congregation. And you folks at home, you can't see how small this congregation is, but we usually have 25 people, something like that. This got 32 today. Is that counting kids? Okay. Well, Yeshua said suffer little children, so we're going to count the kids. All right? We'll count the kids. Well, there's a reason we're going to count the kids, because you know what? They are the future. And did you know that Ashley and Nicole get out and they prepare these Sabbath school lessons every week, and the children come and Brian and April make sure that their kids are there, and they help out where they can, and these little ones are being taught about Yahweh, and guess what? That's getting the next line of campaigners going, and so they're campaigning for Yahweh right in their homes. Huh? I know. Matt's books, Leaving a Spiritual Legacy, and his website, Spiritual Warriors of Yahweh, YHWH. Miles has got a website called Warrior King, where he's ministering really to all kind of people, but it's especially geared towards fellas who have been in war situations to lead them to Yahweh. Isn't that right, Miles? All right? That's some campaigning for Yahweh right there, folks. Chris's website, the Foundation of the Word that he's got going. Miles and Chris are doing podcasts on Foundations Radio. Candace's Today's Dose of Greatness, where she reaches out on Facebook to people. Joey has got a real estate article that he writes in 3 different papers, and guess who winds up getting brought up in Joey's articles quite frequently? Yahweh. Joey's out there campaigning for Yahweh. Debbie keeps the prayer chains going. That's some campaigning for Yahweh right there. She also does so much with keeping things organized and almost getting me here on time and and all the planning and the purchasing that she does for our feasts and so forth. And that's some campaigning for Yahweh right there, because that helps keep this family together. Huh? We have our sermons on YouTube and other outreach. Lindy, helping with finding activities like for the cave search over at the state park and getting props for Sukkot. And Lindy's got a ladies group that she meets with where she was teaching them about the Sabbath. Yeah, that's campaigning for Yahweh, amen? All right, Alex. Oh yeah. Alex just recently was campaigning for Yahweh when she went to get a job. This your first job? Second job. And she went in there with a letter telling what days that she needed off because she worships Yahweh. And her hiring manager said, this is not a problem. And gave her, well, she's taught somebody about Yahweh. Now that's campaigning for Yahweh. Pat's all the time talking to folks at work, he shared some things with me about. You get some pretty interesting questions sometimes, don't you? Pat is always out campaigning for Yahweh. Jenny, she's sitting there talking about Yahweh when she's cleaning people's teeth and they can't get away. That's right, and they can't talk back. All they can do is listen to her campaign for Yahweh, amen. That's right. Robert is constantly reaching out to people on Facebook, and he does it everywhere he goes. Everywhere he goes, Robert is just a glowing example of somebody out there campaigning for Yahweh. And you can and everybody that knows Robert knows that Robert loves Yahweh. Amen. Joanne does all kind of things, and she's even giving people rides with children to get them here to campaign for Yahweh. And let's see, who else have we got here? There's just so many things that this group does. And all of us get out and talk to people. And Tyner gets on, Tyner's 7 years old, and he gets on the Warrior King, and he campaigns for Yahweh. Amen? Debbie was up somewhere in knocks me out, these people that say don't wear your tassels. Debbie was up in Chattanooga, and a lady who happened to be a tassel wearer came up and said, "Are those Deceit?" And they started talking, and ain't they from Cleveland? Might be neighbors of yours. Well, yeah. Oh, okay, but nevertheless, the fact that you're wearing your tassels is campaigning for Yahweh. This little button we came up with. This is Yahweh approved right here. Amen. And there's just all these things. I know Brian was talking to a fellow at work. It's just all the time. All the time. I hope Yahweh's pleased with this little campaign headquarters here in Calhoun. I hope he is pleased with this. And now there's some of you that I know you're doing stuff, and you just hadn't told about that one. There's lots of things that we talk to people about. There's a guy at work that I'm hoping one day that he'll get choked on a piece of pork so I can do the Heimlich maneuver on him and tell him that's why you're not supposed to have that. Tell me. I want it to come out. I want it to come out. I don't want it to stay in there. I really like the boy. I do, but when yeah, but when somebody says I just love my pork chop too much to anyway, Ephesians chapter 6. You know what? I'd really rather him choke on his words. I'd really rather him choke on his words and because in Matthew 15 where Yahshua is talking about it's not what goes into your mouth that makes you unclean, it's what comes out from the heart, the mouth speaks. And one of the things it says is evil reasonings. When you're coming up with reasonings why you don't have to obey Yahweh, that's evil reasonings. Amen. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 11. The reason I put this in here is because when we're campaigning for Yahweh, I mentioned last week that this is more like a real war than just a contest. Put on the complete armor of Elohim for you to have power to stand against the schemes of the devil, because we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against authorities, against the world rulers of the darkness of this age. It's still getting darker. Against spiritual matters of wickedness in the heavenlies. Because of this, take up the complete armor of Elohim so that you have the power to withstand in the wicked day, and having done all to stand, stand then, having guarded your waist with the truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having fitted your feet with the preparation of the good news of peace. Above all, having taken up the shield of belief, with which you shall have power to quench all the burning arrows of the wicked one. Take also the helmet of deliverance and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of Elohim, praying at all times with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, watching in all perseverance and supplication for all the set-apart ones. Now, we'll tell you this. If they are right and we are wrong, right? If they're right and we're wrong, we can back it all the way up. We can back it all the way up to the church. We believe in Messiah, died for our sins. He's the Son of Elohim. He's ascended to the right hand of the Father. Got all that down. We're good. If you get into some of these Messianic groups or these Hebrew root groups or some of these other groups that I don't know what they are, but where they're picking and choosing what parts of the Torah to keep and what not to keep, well, guess what? We're keeping what they're keeping. We're keeping what they're keeping, and we're good. Because they're believing in Messiah, keeping certain things, we believe in keeping those things too. But if we're right and they're wrong, it's no problem. For us, that is. For us, that is. But it will be a big problem for them. And I ask the question, where will you be at 723? You remember that? Turn with me to Matthew chapter 7. This is going to be our last passage for today. Matthew chapter 7. I'm going to start reading in verse 15. Matthew 7, verse 15. This is Yahshua talking, remember? And he says, "But beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are savage wolves. By their fruits you shall know them. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles? So every good tree yields good fruit, but a rotten tree yields wicked fruit. A good tree is unable to yield wicked fruit, and a rotten tree to yield good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So then, by their fruits you shall know them. Not everyone who says to me, Master, Master, shall enter into the reign of the heavens, but he who is doing the desire of my Father in the heavens. Many shall say to me in that day, Master, Master, have we not prophesied in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and done many mighty works in your name? And then I shall declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work lawlessness. That's verse 23. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and does them shall be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain came, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them shall be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain came down, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and they beat on that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. Where will you be at 7:23? When Matthew 7:23 occurs, are you going to be working lawlessness and doing things in the Master's name, but working and teaching lawlessness? Or are you going to listen to what He said and remember that one jot or one tittle shall by no means pass till all be done? Where will you be at 7:23? But in the meantime, while we're campaigning for Yahweh, just be aware that there's going to be mudslinging, lies, and deceit. Yevrakeka Yahweh va'ishmareka Yair Yahweh panavaleka vikaneka Yasa Yahweh panavaleka v'yasem lakash shalom. Yahweh bless you and guard you. Yahweh make His face to shine upon you and show favor to you. Yahweh lift up His face upon you and give you His complete contentment.